Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I have learned as I have grown into the person that I am today. And I brought 5 meditation books with me today. I brought the 2 Melody Beatty books. I brought A Year of Positive Thinking, Daily Inspiration, Wisdom, and Courage by Cindy Spiegel. Well, I mean, I bought these at one point too. Actually, that's not true. Somebody sent me a copy of Journey to the Heart, another version of that. And because my last one, if you have watched this channel for a while, completely fell apart and the pages were falling out and stuff. So somebody was kind enough to send this to me. And then Linda Picone's The Daily Book of Positive Quotations. And then I also brought Believing in Myself, Daily Meditations for Healing and Building Self-Esteem by Ernie Larson and Carol Hegarty. So I thought maybe I would read from this today. I looked in here and it's about hope, and so I thought, well, hope is always a good meditation to read about. So I think I'm going to read from that as well. Let's read from, which one am I feeling? I'm feeling this one, I think. The Daily Book of Positive Quotations. June 5th. I thought I brought my glasses. Oh, here they are. I have my reading glasses. I'm so excited. I have my reading glasses. I have my coffee. I'm looking out at our back deck, which looks gorgeous. It's a beautiful evening in Indianapolis. The birds are flying everywhere and chirping. It's sunny outside. It has just been a beautiful weekend. June 5th, Finding God. The search for God is like riding around on an ox hunting for the ox. Buddhist proverb. We look far and wide for the answer to life's big questions when they may be much closer to us than we realize. How can we open our eyes to the ox we're riding on? Today I will think about what is important in my life, but first I will put on my philosophical reading glasses so that I can see what is right before my eyes. You know, it's interesting. I got a question, and I'm not going to get into my whole journey about finding my higher power and stuff like that. I've talked at length about that over here and on my vlog channel. If you'd like to see a whole video on this channel just dedicated to that, I'm more than willing to talk about that. Somebody asked me recently, can you talk about like what happened before you believed in God and then like what helped you find a higher power? Which I thought was an interesting question. I've told bits and pieces of it through time. And but I do want to share one thing that was like, I think pivotal to me becoming like a spiritual person. And if you watch my videos a lot, then you know that I consider myself a spiritual person, not a religious person. I don't follow any one religious doctrine. I have read a lot about world religions, from everything to do from Christianity to Judaism to Buddhism to Hinduism to Kabbalism to Native American wisdom. I have read a lot about you know, all different kinds of world religions, taken college courses on world religions, a lot of which I didn't understand. And what I have found for myself that works best is kind of a common theme of love, compassion, kindness, forgiveness, and understanding. And using my spiritual core to be the best version of myself that I can be. So when I talk about my spirituality, what I'm talking about is I do feel like there is some, you know, just overriding presence out there. I really do believe that. Before I identified as, I never identified as atheist. I never thought that there was nothing out there. I thought there was something. I just didn't understand for me what that meant. And I have to tell you, when I first got sober, it was very, very important for me that I understood what that was, and that I had like a very like instructions of what that looked like for me and ingredients of what that meant. You know, I don't feel like that today, honestly. And 2 things that, well, okay, so I was at a meeting in early sobriety, and very early sobriety, like 30 days. And I was sitting in the meeting and everybody was talking about God this and God that, and it felt very Bible thumping to me. And so I got up and I walked to the back of the meeting, and I was standing back there, and this woman came up to me and I can still see her in my head. And she said, I had met her like once before, and she said, why did you leave the meeting? And I said, they were just talking a lot about God, and I didn't want to hear that. And she said, is that what you heard? She said, baby, take what you like and leave the rest. And I've always remembered that, you know, not just with spiritual beliefs, but with anything in life. You know, take what you like and leave the rest. And with something that is so personal, because it is very personal to me and it is very private. And even though I talk about it, there's a huge part of my spiritual belief that is very private that I don't ever talk about. And, you know, but the idea of... I would not be here today if 12-step programs told you you had to believe in a certain thing, you know? And I believe that many of my friends who came from very strict religious backgrounds probably wouldn't be sober today if it were that 12-step program said you have to believe this, you have to believe that. I will say this, that 12-step programs, the text and what we read does seem very biblical in nature at first, and I had a hard time with that. But when you read it in context and you understand it over time and you realize that when the basic text was written and other literature from other programs was written, the timing of that, right? You understand that it doesn't really come from a biblical point of view. It comes from a spiritual point of view, but we didn't really know at that time what that meant. Just like when we talk about the word meditation, okay? You know, there was a long period of my sobriety that meditation to me meant I thought that I had to sit and get very still and quiet and be very zen, which I didn't even really understand what that word meant. I didn't fully understand what the religious terminology for meditation meant. When it was later explained to me just years ago that meditation at the time that basic literature was written meant deep thought, okay, it took on a whole new context for me. That to prayer meditation basically means to sit in deep thought and just think about something, whether that be your gratitude list for the day, what you want your day to look like, asking for help, praying for friends and family if you believe that. And I am a person that very deeply believes in prayer, even if it's just positive affirmation in the direction of somebody. I really do believe in just kind of like the positive energy. And you know, I talk about, this is all over the place, but I talk about positive and negative energy a lot, and I think people think I mean it in like some kind of new agey kind of way, which I haven't completely ruled that out, I will say that. I just don't know enough about it. But this is how I think positive and negative energy works for me, okay? So if I'm around a lot of people that are negative and we're complaining a lot, I tend to be more negative. When I'm around a lot of people that are positive, or I'm listening to music that makes me happy, or we're telling jokes, or you know, whatever, I tend to, you know, or playing games or having fun, I tend to be in a more positive mood. So I tend to try to today find myself surrounded by people that have positive energy. Does that make sense? So, you know, all of that to me is spirit. You know, I talk about the sunlight of the spirit and things like that, and, you know, really be, and I use the word God just because it's the easiest thing for me to say. And I know that there are a lot of people in recovery that, you know, use the word God as good orderly direction and things like that. When I got sober, it wasn't that I didn't have a belief in something. I believed that there was something out there. I just didn't have an idea of what that looked like for me. One of the greatest blessings of working a 12-step program is that I was able to come up with my own concept of what a higher power was. And I remember early on with my sponsor, I got very, very stuck early on because, you know, the second step is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And the third step is made a decision to turn our life and our will over to the care of God as we understood him or her and or whatever. And so I got stuck between 2 and 3 because I didn't feel that I could come to believe, right? And then I had to turn my life and my will, my entire life, not just my addiction, but my entire life and my will over to something that I couldn't see, that I wasn't sure I had any faith in, that I had never seen any burning bush, miracles, anything like that, which is so weird in retrospect that because I believe that miracles happen every single day, you know? And they aren't the miracles of yesteryear that we read in, you know, religious texts, but I do believe that miracles happen every single day. I do. And blessings in disguise and God moments. I always talk about, my friends and I always talk about God moments. It's something that my husband is very used to hearing me say. Interestingly enough, and I will say this because I've talked quite a bit about this in my vlogs, is that my husband is an atheist, and I am not. I'm a very spiritual person. I think I'm probably 100 times more spiritual than people would guess from my videos, and I talk a lot about it with my friends and things like that, and you know, it's never caused any issues with us in our relationship. And I think it's testament to the fact that you can have very different belief systems about something in a marriage and be open to what the other person has to say about it, you know? And in some ways, and hearing about, you know, my husband's belief about it, it's kind of even more so confirmed my belief systems about things, right? That mutual respect of that. And I have other friends that have very different, you know, they have religious beliefs and I don't. And I think it's just in respecting one another and what they say. And so I have true respect for people as long as their religious beliefs aren't something that condemn me to hell or I feel like are doing more harm than good to other people. So I remember I was working, steps with my, I think it was my second sponsor actually, and there's a part of the book that says God either is or he isn't. And I was sitting there and I was like, well, but like I don't know about this and I don't know about that and what about this and what about that, blah, blah, blah. And I grew up with two parents that were highly spiritual people. I grew up going to church. I had no negative interactions with church whatsoever. My church was a safe place for me. And it was actually one of the first churches in Indianapolis that acknowledged having gay congregation people, people in the gay people in their congregation, or LGBT people in their congregation. And they also were one of the first churches to like marry gay couples and things like that. So, and my mom had gone to, she was very proud of the church that she went to, which was St. Paul's Episcopal here in Indianapolis. And it was the first church to marry gay couples. And she was always really proud of that. And both of my parents came from religious backgrounds and were completely open-minded to anything I wanted to read about, whether that was, there was a period of high school where I read a lot about Buddhism. And there was a period in high school where I wanted tarot cards. And I was reading a lot about that kind of stuff. And I remember my dad taking me into B-Dolls and buying me a deck of tarot cards and sitting down and saying, like, if you use this for positivity, use it if you want to learn about it in a positive way, I think that's fine, And we always had conversations about that, which I think is important. They weren't afraid of what was going to happen with that. They just wanted to be part of that conversation. And I'm so blessed that I had two parents that were very open-minded about allowing me to learn my own spiritual journey or go on my own spiritual journey, as long as, and this was what they always said, as long as it's positive, right? Like, as long as it's not like negative kind of energy kind of stuff. So here I am then years later, and I'm working with my sponsor, and I want to have the perfect idea of what God is, because I don't feel like I can move on unless I do, right? And I can see him, and he just looks at me and he goes, God either is or he isn't. I'm like, he is. And I'm like, but and then 2 years later down the road is when I really went on this spiritual journey to find out, really what God looked like to me, what that whole concept was. And the thing is I think that I have this whole idea in the back of my head that it should look a certain way, and it didn't. And I remember, this is weird. So at one point, my spiritual journey has been the majority of my recovery, right? I didn't think I talked this long about this, but anyway, the thing I wanted to say, there's a couple things that have really stood out to me. And when I was in high school, so I went to a high school where I would say a third of the people there were very, very religious. And I can remember people in class talking about, well, Jesus Christ this and whatever, and I thought, they are so phony. They do not believe this stuff. Because I had never internalized any spiritual beliefs, right? And so I was like, I don't think that they really believe this. I think they're fake and I think they're phony. But even though I knew that maybe that religious idea wasn't for me, that there was something about that spiritual belief or that faith, I think it was that idea of faith and hope, that I really wanted for myself. I was jealous and envious that other people had it and I had not had that experience. And so, flash forward to, years later, I remember sitting in a meeting and this guy was sharing his story. And this was early on in sobriety too. This was probably my first 90 days. And I remember he said that he was so resistant to any idea of God or any kind of we say the sunlight of the spirit, or any kind of idea of any kind of spirituality. And he said, I was willing to put anything in my body. I was willing to put alcohol, drugs, pills, cocaine, anything into my body and have faith that it would have some kind of adjustment to my mentality or my emotions or give me some kind of experience. But I'm not willing to do the same thing with a spiritual experience. And I remember hearing that and I thought, that is so true. I have been willing to put anything into my body. It could have killed me, right? And many times almost did. I put anything into my body to have an experience, but I wasn't willing to open my mind up enough to try to have a spiritual experience. So that was one of the things that really kind of jolted me at that time. And then I think the experience that I had with this woman in the meeting where she said, take what you like and baby take what you like and leave the rest. That was another one, And then I had to kind of go on this spiritual experience of my own. And I've talked a lot about that where I started reading the books and my sponsor was like, what's your biggest fear? And I said, death. And so the first book that I read, he said, find a book that deals with your biggest fear. And I read Sylvia Browne's book, The Other Side and Back. Yes, the psychic, Sylvia Browne. And I know it sounds kind of funny, but it was really a book that I think it was the book I needed to read at that time to help me start this kind of spiritual journey where I then went on and I read, books that are important to read, I think, from different religious backgrounds and just spirituality in general. And that's really the meditation books had helped me a lot and stuff. And then, I don't know at what point this would have been, but I read the book, She Said Yes. And somebody gave me this book, and I was like, I don't know what I think about this book. And it was about the girl that was in Columbine, I believe. And one of the shooters looked at her and said, "Do you believe in God?" And she said yes, and they shot her. The book is more than just that. It goes in and talks about her whole history and everything like that. But I can remember reading that book and thinking to myself back on those people that I went to high school with, you know, because I was somebody that like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, well, how long have I been sober? 26? Yeah, I think probably 20 years ago, probably maybe even 15 years ago, maybe even more than that. Maybe just in the last 10 years, I've been somebody that's really talked about my spiritual beliefs openly. Before that, I was very shy about it. I wasn't even sure I understood or knew or enough to talk about it. And I can remember just being like, I would never have said like out loud that I believed in God. You know, I would have felt like I was a Bible thumper to somebody, you know? And I remember reading that book, and I read the book long after it came out, and I remember it really was like, wow, like in that moment, you know, like if you were in that moment, what would you say? What would you do? Would you be ashamed of your faith, or would you stand behind it? You know, and that is truly, I think, what faith is, you know? And then I heard this lead, this was a couple years ago, and it was this woman, and she was talking about how she was on a beach, and she met this older woman that was in sobriety as well, and they were sitting there, and they were talking about God, and she kept on having all these questions about God. Like, she just couldn't understand God, what God had meant for her, what God had for her planned, and all this kind of stuff. And so the older woman who had been sober for quite some time looked at her and said, "You do realize that any concept of God that is true for you is too big for you ever to understand." And it was like, slapped me in the face. I was like, any concept of God that would be true to my life is on such a huge level that I'm never going to understand it, right? It's like God to ants kind of thing. Like, how could I understand something if I really truly do believe that it's a higher power? How could I possibly fully understand everything about it? That's not how it works, right? And she went on to say that this woman said to her, you know, you're really missing out on the sunlight of the Spirit. You're missing out on all of the good that comes as a result of that because you're so resistant to try to have to figure out exactly what it looks like. And that was me. I had to figure out exactly what it looked like, you know? And she said something to her. It's like you're standing on the beach and everybody else is standing around you and you've got an umbrella up and you're not getting any of the sun. And it just was so profound to me, you know? It's also like when Oprah, she really wanted a part in the movie The Color Purple from the book by Alice Walker. And she had auditioned and she had waited and waited and waited and they didn't call her back. And she tells this on a YouTube video. You can go watch it because it was a clip from like her 35th anniversary or something. And I bought that for my mom. So all the aha moments. This was one of her aha moments. Was she wanted to do anything she could possibly do on the set of the movie, whether it was like just run scripts or bring water or whatever. So she had called her agent, and her agent said, you do realize there are like real actresses that are like auditioning for this part of Miss Sophia. It's not just you, right? And so she went to this weight loss camp to lose weight. And she was there, and she was walking around the track. And this was another profound moment for me that was a God moment when I heard this. Because I think I was having a hard time surrendering and letting go of a lot of stuff in my life. And she said she was walking around the track, and she was just talking to God. And I love that idea of conscious conversations with God, you know. And she said okay, God, this is obviously not what you have planned for me. But whatever you have planned for me next, I'm here for it, you know, and I'll let this go. This is obviously not in my journey. This is not in my plan or something like that, right? And then she started singing the song, I Surrender All. I love the CeCe Winans version of that song, by the way. And she said as soon as she started singing it, her assistant came out on the track and said, Steven Spielberg's on the phone for you. And she got on the phone. Was it Steven Spielberg that directed? I think. And said, and he said, I heard you're at a weight loss camp. If you lose 1 pound, the part is not yours. And she said on the way home, I get chills still telling the story because it means so much to me, you know? And she said on the way home, she stopped at Dairy Queen and got a Blizzard. I think that's how God works in my life. God works in the small moments. You know, God works in the blessings in disguise. God works in the ways that I don't. God for me is sometimes in the cracks, in the crevices, you know, and not necessarily in the foundation. But I think for me, it's about having faith You know, there's a saying that since the day I got sober, God hasn't dropped me on my butt yet, right? And there's a lot of truth to that. And I have a friend of mine that says, since the day I got sober, I haven't been dropped on my butt with God's grace. And I think there's truth in that too, and I have to lean out to that. So I think it's a good meditation, you know, and I think the thing is, my spiritual journey has allowed me to be more open-minded to other people's spiritual journeys and what that looks like for them, so that I'm not so resistant to that. I mean, there was a period in my youth, which with anybody, you know, like, I mean, if it was a religious person that wanted to talk to me about like being gay or whatever, I would have like immediately been like, well, you need to, you know. I'm not like that today, you know? And I realize, I try to see somebody from where they're at, like where, you know, like I love the saying, like, where are my feet? When I look, I'm in today, right? Like, where are they at today? And how can I meet them where they're at? You know? And I don't necessarily think that's a Christian thing or a Buddhist thing or a religious thing. I think that's a loving thing to do, to meet somebody where they're at and see them human to human, you know? And my spiritual journey has allowed me to do that. It's allowed me to quit picking people apart for how I don't relate to them and how we're different. And it's allowed me to see the similarities, not the differences. It is so weird. The sun just started coming in here. Did you see that? The video started lighting up. Sunlight of the Spirit. So anyway, let me know what you think about those. So that's what I was going to say. My spiritual journey has allowed me to see the similarities, not the differences. But anyway, let me know what you think about that meditation in the comment section below. I love you guys. I hope you're having a magically amazing weekend. And I will see you tomorrow. Bye.